There's been speculation that Columbina might appear in Natlan at some point, as going off the Fatui constellation wheel, her symbol is up next for our Fatui boss fight. Genshin have a habit of breaking patterns, so this isn't set in stone, but so far we've had 4 bosses following this pattern, so I think it's at least worth considering. Going off Capitano's actions so far, and what we know of him, it doesn't seem like he's going to be antagonistic towards the Traveler, especially as he acknowledges them as the sibling of the Prince or Princess of Conria, and has a deep respect for the people of Natlan. Though with what seems to be his constellation coming after Columbina's, I can definitely see him reluctantly fighting against us in order to protect the Tsaritsa once we reach Snezhnaya. There's also a lot of focus on the Seelie in Natlan, with the Lord of the Night playing a prominent role, and I think she might even be closely tied to Columbina, which I'll explain further in. So if I had to guess which Harbinger will be the boss of Natlan, I lean more towards Columbina. There's a lot to Columbina, though most of it is shrouded in mystery. It seems that she's a Seelie, or at least related to them, as she shares their love of singing, and has dove wings on her head, symbolizing angels, which are now confirmed to be what the Seelie were, and ties back to Before Sun and Moon, with the title When the Doves Held Branches, indicating that they were a link between the Primordial One and humanity as the Divine Envoys. Covering her eyes ties her to another Seelie too, the Goddess of Flowers, who tells Deshret this: "Since the disaster, I have long been cursed to never again look upon the heavens. It is my fortune that I have been able to maintain myself till now, but my home calls to me nigh constantly, even as a disaster between the stars and the abyss grows ever emergent on the surface of the crystals." The Goddess of Flowers seemed to have been a particularly powerful Seelie, or perhaps more intelligent than most, as she avoided the worst effects of the curse the others suffered from, with another being the Seelie from A Drunkard's Tale. It seems this Seelie was the god that gave Andreas his powers, as in the story, a Wolf King was the last survivor of his pack, wandering a barren wasteland until he overheard a young maiden with ashen white skin playing a lute and sat down in front of her, forgetting the pain of hunger, thirst, and loneliness for a short while. He asked what the song was, and she said, "A song of the Seelie," replied the pale young maiden in a soft voice. "Long, long ago, we wrote this song for the human savages, yet now we sing it to mourn our own fate." So if Columbina is a Seelie, she's probably around the level of those two, who are referred to as gods, especially since the top 3 Harbingers are said to be as powerful as gods. One thing that might explain these particular Seelie keeping their forms could be what caused them to be exiled by the Primordial One in the first place: forbidden knowledge. When we look into the Goddess of Flowers' eyes, we see beauty, but also the darkness of the abyss. Her appearance is like the totality of her Jinn, their wondrous aspects only mere petals to her complete flower, her being the quintessence to every last scent in existence. And then, you meet her gaze, and face nothingness. You greet the endless void, falling into its embrace, mind afire with constant terror. And she seems to know all about the secrets of the stars and the abyss from her conversations with Deshret and Rukkhadevata. As Rukkhadevata explains, forbidden knowledge is knowledge that does not belong to this world. But if these Seelie could gain a higher level of understanding or control over it, it could have given them the ability to circumvent or partially avoid the curse, as the Goddess of Flowers says. And though the invaders brought war to my former kin, they also brought illusions that could break through the shackles to this land. But the Master of the Heavens, consumed by fear for the rising tide of delusion and breakthroughs, sent down the divine nails to mend the land, laying waste to the mortal realm, We then suffered the torment of exile. Stripped was our connection to heaven, to our powers of enlightenment, indicating that at least some of the Seelie and people were using this knowledge to make breakthroughs in areas the Primordial One forbid. This might tie in with Clotar Alberich being able to die, even while suffering the curse of immortality due to his ties to the Abyss via Vedalfnir. What made me think of Columbina as I was researching Natlan was a funny coincidence, as the mural depicting an abyssal dragon burning an Irminsul-like tree shows a Seelie being burned by the flames too, which reminded me of an older video I made where I called Columbina a scorched dove. This was due to different reasons, as I linked the story of the Greek god Apollo sending a white raven to spy on his lover and scorching it black after it returned with bad news, with the Primordial One cursing the Seelie after they fought against the armies of the Second Who Came, and became influenced by them in the process. We'll get to it in more detail after I explain a few more things about Columbina, but I have a list of reasons why she could have been one of the Seelie depicted here. So with all this, I think we can fairly confidently say she's a Seelie, or closely associated with them, and this ties into her main inspiration from the Commedia dell'arte. As with the rest of the Harbingers, Columbina is based on a character from the Commedia dell'arte, known as Columbine or Columbina in Italian, meaning little dove. She plays the role of Pierrot's wife and is sometimes Harlequin or Arlecchino's mistress. She's often depicted as the only functional intellect on the stage, being very down to earth and seeing the situation for exactly what it is. It's hard to say which inspirations will be followed and which will be twisted, as we have Tartaglia, who in the Commedia is depicted as an old man with a stutter, while Child is the youngest Harbinger and a pretty smooth talker, seeming to get along with most people he meets. I think we can rule out Columbina being Piero's wife and having an affair with Arlecchino, as Genshin tend to stay away from focusing on romance between playable characters. Her being down to earth also seems quite antithetical to her character, as even in a literal sense, she's from the heavens, and she's been described as if she's within her own little dream world by the Harbingers we've met.
She is a very special Harbinger. Pose her a question, and the answer you receive will be entirely unpredictable, if she sees fit to give a proper answer at all. Regardless, any answer you do receive is sure to be an interesting one.
The Fatui Harbingers are ranked by strength, and I have no idea why that girl is number 3. I'd test my skills with every Harbinger who ranks above me if I had the chance, but when it comes to her, something just doesn't feel right. Anyway, you should be careful around her.
Let me ask. What should you do if you were to encounter a damsel who is oblivious and innocent at any given time, and unconcerned and unfeeling in any given situation? If it were me, I could at least challenge her to a fight. But if it were you, with your conscience, I would stay away from her.
Though I wonder if she's misunderstood, because she can see or understand things that regular people are unaware of, like the Melusine being able to see things that humans can't. She seems not to take the world very seriously, and according to Scaramouche, has a lack of concern for pretty much anything going on. We get a hint of this when she teases Dottore about him looking very young, likely knowing that this comment would annoy him. I almost imagine it like she's seen some truth of the universe that has caused her to view Teyvat like a dream. This is quite a lot like the way Child views it too. Without going into a deep dive on his character, he's described as solipsistic, the belief that only your own mind is certain to exist, which ties back to his time within the Abyss and his eyes losing their shine. If I'm right about Columbina having a generally similar experience with the Abyss, it might even explain the magenta-colored highlights in her hair, the same color as the flowers in Sumeru associated with the goddess of flowers, who, as we went over before, also seems to have acquired some level of understanding of forbidden knowledge, and Natlan might have shown us the event that caused Columbina to become the way she is. Before I get into what could have happened to her, I wanted to share this as it's one of the most interesting things I found while researching Columbina. There's a genus of doves called Columbina which are native to Central and South America, which is a nice little link back to Natlan. But then I dug a bit deeper, and there's a specific type of dove from there called the Columbina minuta, and minuta is from the Latin minutus, meaning small, as it's one of the smallest types of doves, fitting perfectly with Columbina from the Commedia dell'arte being known as the little dove. This genus of doves are generally grey or brown with pink highlights, quite similar to the colours of Columbina's hair. Going back to the mural depicting a Seelie being burned by the abyssal dragon, if this was Columbina, then the flames may have been what exposed her to knowledge from the abyss and potentially caused her to go a bit off the rails from the pain. If not, the doves I just mentioned typically stick together in pairs, so this could have been the Seelie that she was closest to, and she was the one under the protection of the tree, which fits into her Aztec inspirations perfectly. Columbina has a ton of similarities with the Aztec goddess Ichpochtli, also known as Xochiquetzal, as to start with, Columbina is a maiden or damselette, and Ichpochtli means maiden. The goddess is depicted as a young woman associated with beauty, love, weaving, the moon, flowers, and was a protector of young mothers, sounding a lot like the Seelie, especially the Wyob under the Lord of the Night, who views the people of Natlan as her children. Xochiquetzal was taken from her husband by Tezcatlipoca, a god of the night sky, to become his wife, taken and tortured within the underworld, and she's also said to have been married to Xiuhtecuhtli, the god of fire. This was quite a big find, as in a previous video I made several connections between Capitano and Tezcatlipoca, whose aspect's name means night wind, and Xiuhtecuhtli was the Aztec lord of fire, whose spirit form was Xicoatl, the fire serpent, which is the name of the Pyro sovereign. These stories don't mean that she was married to Capitano or the Pyro sovereign, but her having close ties to many of the more prominent inspirations does stand out to me as significant for Natlan's upcoming story. And luckily for me, Rohan Kashibe8984 commented on Capitano's origins and Columbina's Wrath video with some amazing information on an aspect of Xochiquetzal that I overlooked. They told me that an aspect of hers was called Ixnechli, which means ashes in eyes, a metaphor for her being blinded from crying and unable to look up at the heavens she once lived in, which ties back to the goddess of flowers and the Seelie curse of not being able to look up at the heavens. She came from Tamawanchan, which for our purposes is basically like Celestia, a paradise of the gods, but was expelled for eating a forbidden fruit from the sacred tree, with the tree being split in two afterwards. We can take the forbidden fruit to be like the one from the Bible that gave Adam and Eve knowledge they weren't meant to have, and led to them being exiled from Eden, which ties back to the Seelie learning about forbidden knowledge and the primordial one cursing and expelling them because of it. Perhaps if Columbina is the Seelie under the Irminsul-like tree here, she literally took a forbidden fruit from it. As to why it was forbidden, taking it could have caused the tree to wither, or it was already contaminated by the abyss, which might have been purified by the tree enough not to drive her completely mad, but still gain some knowledge that she wasn't supposed to know. Xochiquetzal's name means precious feather flower, so she likely has ties to the flower feather clan, which may give her some parallels to Chaska and Menelek having endured a life of suffering. The flower feather clan is also known as Tlalocan, which was ruled over by Tlaloc, Xochitl husband, and Xochitl's festival was known as the Farewell to the Flowers, signifying the coming of frost. So if Columbina is from Natlan, I'd be surprised if she wasn't associated with the tribe in at least some way. The Seelie of Natlan are supposed to have mostly died out during the Second War against the dragons, and the armies of the Second who came. But the Lord of the Night tells us that there are at least a few angels left, so I wonder if she knew Columbina and the Seelie we see burning is the Lord of the Night, and only her soul remains, which is why it inhabits the Night Kingdom and manifests through a machine in the real world, kind of paralleling Sumeru's Lilupar and her older sister Ferrages, who gave up her body and housed her soul inside a machine to keep the goddess of flowers' grave safe. Since Columbina joined the Fatui, we can assume that she wants to punish Celestia, and if she blames them for what happened to the Seelie and Natlan, it's easy to see her motivations. Even not accounting for that, the Seelie were cursed to lose their minds and bodies by Celestia, which would be reason enough for her to want vengeance against them. So far, I think we've got a pretty strong case for her having ties to Natlan, but let's look into how she could be the next Fatui boss. We seem to be lining up for a fight against Gasoithoth in 5.3, which is probably an abyssal entity mimicking a dragon, as we can see it use the same type of barrier that Neuvillette uses, and we know that Nibelung was corrupted by the Abyss, so it'd make sense it'd be able to copy his abilities. There's also the Pyro Sovereign, who is suspiciously absent in most of the lore, being described as a grey corpse by the Sage of Stolen Flame, so I wouldn't be surprised if after his death, his spirit went into the Night Kingdom and slowly became corrupted by the Abyss, which would explain why the Sacred Flame only has about a year left, as the Abyss consuming him completely would remove it at its source. It'd also explain why when the Abyss attacked, it seemed to manifest from the same source as the Sacred Flame. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. What I'm getting at is that Columbina likely won't be the next boss we fight, as she's not the entity at the source of Natlan's problems with the Abyss. So she's possibly going to be the next boss after it, like Arlecchino coming after the Narwhal in Fontaine. This would fit with Capitano being unwilling to steal the Gnosis or do anything dishonorable, and with Pyro being the mastermind he is, I'm 99% sure he's either already accounted for that and just sent Capitano to Natlan so that he can help prevent the Abyss from taking over Teyvat, or that he's been updated on the situation and can tell he needs to send someone who has no problems taking the Gnosis by any means necessary. And if Columbina has such deep ties to Natlan, it'd make sense that Pyro would send her to take the Pyro Gnosis, but only after Capitano had made sure that the Abyss was no longer an imminent threat. If we think of it like a game of chess, Capitano would be the defensive knight, whereas Columbina, as his next move, would be the offensive bishop. With what Arlecchino, Child, and Wanderer told us about her, and from what we know of the Seelie and the Genie, I don't think she'd have any reservations about the destruction she caused to get it, the opposite of Capitano. Personally, I hope we can pull for Capitano in Natlan, even without having a boss fight against him, but as long as he's going to be playable, I don't mind waiting until Snezhnaya to get him. There's a lot of discussion about what's going to happen with the Pyro Gnosis at the end of Natlan, with the most common thought I've seen being that the Traveler should have it and then travel to Snezhnaya with it as a bargaining chip, which makes sense if getting the last Gnosis allows the Fatui to instantly enact their endgame to rebel against Celestia. But I don't really see a problem with the Fatui taking it and us having to chase them to Snezhnaya to try and stop whatever they're doing, as narratively, it'd raise the stakes a lot more than us just waltzing into Snezhnaya and either giving it up anyway or having it taken from us. Plus, I don't think whatever the Tsaritsa and Pyro were planning is just going to require them to slot the Gnosis into a machine and it all works perfectly right away. There's probably some testing and magic related stuff that will take time to activate whatever plan they have. This is probably why they're preparing Project Stuzha, which is Russian for cold, implying that the Tsaritsa, being the Cryo Archon, will cover Teyvat in snow to represent the 3-year-long winter known as Fimbulwinter, the prelude to Ragnarok, and the world being set on fire, which we've known is the goal of the Tsaritsa and Pyro since 1.0. I think this would be a good excuse for us to return to the previous nations to help them out with the unexpected weather and allow us to uncover more answers to the questions we still have about them. This would work for Mondstadt's eventual expansion to the north, which is said to be a snowy area anyway, so we could be sent there to learn how to help the people of southern Mondstadt stay warm. In Liyue, Rex Lapis made a deal with the Tsaritsa, so I think this could mean that Snezhnaya will help them with surviving the cold as they're experts at it, possibly giving them machines like the ones from Belobog that keep surrounding areas warm. I'm sure you can come up with examples for other nations, like finally getting something concrete on the Electro Sovereign in Inazuma, and huge areas we've yet to explore, like Mount Isis and Fontaine. But you get the idea. There's still a lot of Teyvat we've yet to discover, and a change in the environment for a few patches would make revisiting previous nations more visually interesting. At least until we get sick of everywhere being covered in snow, or if they're feeling evil, and add a sheer cold mechanic to the whole map. Anyway, that's all I've got on Columbina for now. Let me know if you've got any theories or interesting bits of information that come to mind, as I'm sure there's more I haven't covered. Thanks for watching until the end, good luck on your wishes, and I hope you have a lovely day.